All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to the Spring 2021 Anti-Racism Lecture Series here at Caldwell University. We're excited to bring this initiative rather, back to the community rights we had one in the fall, ran the original fall semester, and it worked out really well. And all the topics were really engaging and enlightening. And we're happy to have a host of faculty members here to bless us with their presence and their expertise. So before we get started with tonight's lecture, we're actually going to play a short welcome video from the student Sophie Hicks, who helped to create this initiative. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen and play Sophie's message. So give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to hope this works. So fingers crossed. All right, do you all hear that or no?
No.
No, you do not hear that.
Especially under 1 minute.
Abdul,
Yes, Stacy.
and when I teach using Meets, I share a tab, not a screen.
A tab. Okay, thank you, Stacy. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Stacy. That makes a big difference.
I mean, there really should be like an instruction booklet, and you could just like flip to the right page and find out what you need. It's just, that's her. Okay, take two. How was that?
Lecture series for the spring semester. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there.
Yep, just turn your volume up.
I'm actually in New Zealand completing everything online, and the timing just really wasn't quite right. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to this semester. We have some really, really great topics lined up. Just a couple notes before we get started. We will be recording the first session, every topic, so that will be the lecture session, just so other people that miss it can go online and access it. And we're actually uploading them all to the school website, I believe, plus the ones from last semester and the resources from last semester, so like the PowerPoints and things like that. Also, please remember that this is a safe and open space for people. Just please be here to listen, to share if you want to, and just be respectful of other people. Yeah, but enjoy, and I will be watching the recording myself, so bye.
All right, so the audio for that was pretty low, but I hope you could all at least understand. Sophie, she just said, in general, thank you. We're here to listen and learn. We're going to have recordings of all the lectures, not the discussion. So part one of every topic. And the aim is to get that on the school's website. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Neil, Dr. Malvone, and you can get things started for us.
Well, thank you so much, Abdul. I appreciate I want to thank everybody who was able to put this together. You just heard from Sophie Hicks, one of our students that really has taken the lead in focusing on this very important topic. And she's in New Zealand right now, but her heart is still at Caldwell. And I really appreciate the fact that she reached out to me and asked me to participate in this very important series. I also want to thank Abdul, Director of Student Advocacy and Prevention Awareness here at Caldwell. Again, it's people like Abdul, people like Sophie that help bring attention to these really current and relevant topics. And I can't thank you enough. We had that snowstorm last week and we managed it just fine. And here we are finally together. And yesterday when they said snow again, I said, I hope we're not going to push this off one more time. But Abdul, thank you so much for all that you do. And Colleen, of course, I'm not sure what I can say about all the things you do across campus to help us organize these things and really keep us focused on what's important. So again, I wanted to thank you and to my colleagues, to students and friends, thank you for giving me a platform to speak about anti-racism in sport. It's a very a topic that's dear to me on a personal and a professional level. So I'm really blessed to have this forum tonight. For those of you who do not know me, I am Professor Neil Malvone. I am an assistant professor here at Caldwell University, and I teach sport management and our new major, esports management, in the School of Business and Computer Science. In that notion, I want to also thank my colleagues in the business department, including Dr. Rich and Dr. Bernie O'Rourke, for all that they do and the guidance they've given me and the support to be able to do these kind of projects. In addition to teaching, I founded my own company 10 years ago called Cutting Edge Sports Management, and that company focuses on sport events, and we put on events across the country. One of the events that we host is a football showcase event called the HBCU Spirit of America Bowl. And for those of you unfamiliar, HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. My company is extremely proud to host that event. We would have had our 5th year this year, but for the COVID virus canceling the event in January. But that's an event that we host over Martin Luther King weekend. And what makes it so special is it's the only event in football that's focused solely on the historically Black college university football players. And from that game, we have had several players drafted, and several players are now playing in the NFL because of the opportunity that we give to those student athletes from those historically Black colleges. And again, there's something to be said for walking the walk and talking the talk. And I'd like to think that I do both, and that I through that event, I get a better understanding of this particular issue. And don't get me wrong, I cannot ever put myself in the shoes of those players or people of color that have to deal with what they've had to deal with and continue to deal with. But I'd like to think that a little bit of what I do personally has had an impact on them in trying to make a better opportunity or afford them a better opportunity. And I think we've done that. So having said that, I wanted to transition to a really important question that I was asked several times over the last couple of weeks preparing for this. And that's, why sports when you talk about racism or anti-racism? What does sports have to do with that? Right? Sports has people of color, Black, Latinos, Asians playing. So why would sports be a relevant topic to speak about racism? Well, we have to take a step backwards if we're going to answer that question. We have to look at this from the sociological perspective of sport. And one of my favorite things to study and to teach is how sport is such an important institution in our society. And Abdul purposely picked this week, and it would have been last week and this week, for this discussion because of the Super Bowl. And then, quite frankly, in a world where there's so much havoc going on, to have a Super Bowl event yesterday, at least for a few hours on that first Sunday in February, gave us a little bit of a sense of normalcy again. And the power of the Super Bowl is really a perfect example of the power of sport and its integration and ingration in our society. It's very rare to find somebody that doesn't know about the Super Bowl. Right? I joke about my mother in class all the time. The only football player she knows is Joe Namath, right? And that's, 40 years ago, for goodness sakes. But Super Bowl Sunday, she knows. She knows it's a day to eat. It's a day to socialize. It's a day to have a few drinks. It's a day to enjoy an American pastime. And that power of sport, of socialization, of building connections between people, giving schools and teams identities, creating culture and tradition and values, and offering insights into our societal issues, religion, race, gender. That all comes from the institution of sport. And the other piece is the role models that we see from our athletes. Now, Charles Barkley, many years ago, famously or infamously said, and I'll share with you exactly what he said, He said, I am not a role model. Let me see if I can get this. I did it before, Colleen, so hopefully I can do it again.
There it goes. You're good.
Okay. Everybody can see that? And so
Yep.
Charles, famously said, I'm not a role model. Well, Charles, you're wrong. You are absolutely a role model. The same way a professor is a role model, the same way somebody that works in a grocery store could be a role model. We're all role models, but athletes more so because they can set the tone. They can set the culture of an entire generation by what they do. And that's what's so fascinating to me about sport and sociology together. Sociology, of course, is the study of society, its institutions, and its relationships. Sports sociology is the study of sport within those institutions and within those relationships. The study of sports sociology is a relatively new course of study. 1968, the father of sports sociology, Dr. Harry Edwards, convinced his doctoral board that this was a subject worth studying. And for the longest time, he worked very hard to convince them of that, because back then, and still sometimes today, people look at sport as a game, as a recreation. They don't see the impact that it has on institutions. And I cannot do justice to Dr. Edwards and how he explained the relationship of sport to society. So I would indulge you if you would allow me to show a video of Dr. Edwards explaining the thesis behind it and the fact that from that thesis, he created the first sport of sociology textbook, and one that I'm proud to own in my office, the original version of it. So again, can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
No,
No.
not yet.
All right, hold on. Let me try again. If I was on campus, it'd be a lot easier. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay.
Have come a very, very long way since 1967. But the reality is that most of it has been compelled by developments at that time. My dissertation that I finally ended up writing coming out of 1968, Cornell University, was titled Sociology of Sport. And it became the first integrated textbook focusing on a sociological analysis of sport as a social institution. Up until that time, sport had been relegated to physical education. Sociologists didn't feel that it was up to their standard as an area of career focus or analysis. And one of the big challenges that I had was convincing even the people at Cornell that sport was worth looking at, that despite 105 years of sociology, a major institution, an increasingly important institution, had been overlooked and bypassed, mostly out of academic arrogance, that this was beneath us to deal with these physical activities. And the thing that finally convinced them that, hey, yeah, you can go ahead and write your dissertation in this area, was when I asked the question during a committee meeting, committee conference, my committee that was overseeing my dissertation, how can we believe as sociologists that a dyad, a two-person relationship, or a triad, a three-person relationship, is worthy of analysis that includes volumes and hundreds of dissertations, but 100 million people watching the Super Bowl is not worthy of investigation from a sociological perspective. It seems to me that that's a bit upside down. They had no response to that other than, okay, go ahead. So
Abdul, again, perfect timing to do this during the Super Bowl, because Dr. Edwards references the Super Bowl as this sociological basis for studying sport. And I couldn't think of a better time to do it based upon that video. And I love watching that video. I've seen it so many times because it really does capture the essence of what sports sociology is and why the topic of racism and sport can go together. And what's interesting about Dr. Edwards is that this started for him in the late 60s. And again, I'm going to date myself because those were the years that I was born, but I studied that time because it was such a powerful time in our country. 1964, we had the Civil Rights Act passed by President Lyndon Johnson. 1967, we saw all this civil unrest and Martin Luther King becoming this prominent figure. And then, of course, 1968, we had Tommy Smith and John Carlos raise their fists in a power salute at the Olympics. I mean, that's the time frame that Dr. Edwards said, we have to study sport. We have to understand its sociological impact. And from that moment, Dr. Edwards became an activist for social change, for social justice through the platform of sports. And that's why I call him the father of sports sociology, because he came at the right time, at the right moment where this country needed somebody to explain race through a different lens, not through politics, not through family, but through sport. And I think for a lot of us, sport is something we can all relate to. And we certainly know who won the Super Bowl yesterday. We certainly know about Tom Brady and his 7 rings and how he said he's going to stay and play until he gets one for each finger, right? We understand that aspect of sport, but understanding it at a different level, understanding the power of sport and what it can do to change our society, that's what started in 1968 and has continued since that time from an education perspective. But the real change that sport brought us started on April 15th, 1947. And again, if I was in class teaching this, I would be teaching this as a quiz to my students, and I would have them raising their hands. Why is this frozen here? Okay. So April 15th, 1947, I would say, what does that mean? And I would ask my students to raise their hands once they figured it out. It happened in Brooklyn at Ebbets Field, number 42, baseball. Hopefully everybody has their hand up by now, but if you don't, the answer is Jackie Robinson. The first time that sport and society intersected in a way that effectuated real change happened on April 15th, 1947 in Brooklyn. Everybody knows the story of Jackie Robinson, and if you don't, you need to understand it because he is the most influential athlete in the history of sport. And that's not me saying it. That's what people have acknowledged because of what he did. And we all know that on that date, Jackie broke the color barrier in baseball. Not only did it change history for Black athletes, it changed sport history and it changed American history. It changed the way we look at sports. We no longer could look at the score. We could no longer look at the data and the records and just look at sport from a peripheral perspective. On April 15th, 1947, we had to start looking at it from a societal perspective. We had to start to understand that Jackie Robinson was the best and first example that sport can be a vehicle for change. And we can't dismiss that because it's sport. We can only accept that it's sport. Right? The most influential athlete in sports We've seen the movie or read the book. I tell my students, read the book, and of course they go out and watch the movie, but that's the generation that we live in, right? But read the book or watch the movie. There's a scene where Jackie's coming up to the bat and the Philadelphia manager is saying such vile, hateful things. And it's painful to watch, but it's important to watch. It's important to appreciate what Jackie had to go through in 1947. That we weren't a society that was accepting of this type of change. And the courage that he had to have to make that happen is, again, why I consider him the most influential athlete of all time. Jackie said in 1957, 60, sometime, he said to his teammate Carl Erskine that he wished society could be like baseball. Baseball, in his view, is more advanced than society, more connected. Baseball gave men an even chance. Baseball allowed dreams to be realized. Think about that. Think about the fact that Jackie Robinson, who went through such hatred and went through such discomfort and vile communications, his wife was threatened. He had to sleep in a different hotel. He had to take a different bus. Teammates wouldn't shower in the locker room with him. And he still said that he wished society was like baseball. Because back then, society was not giving African Americans a chance. They were not giving people of color the opportunity. But in 1947, we started to finally see that connection between sport and society, that connection between who cares about the color of your skin. What matters is whether you're good at something or not. What matters is, are you able to help this baseball team win? Are you able to help an organization be a Fortune 500 company? Are you able to help a country be better than it was yesterday? President Obama, Vice President Kamala Harris have raised the bar. And to me, a lot of that started in 1947. Before Jackie Robinson, the study of sport was, as Dr. Edwards said, more about the physical activity. After Jackie Robinson, we started to see how sport changed society. And another powerful slide that I want to share here kind of illuminates to me what happened after 1947 better than I can explain it. 7 years later, Brown versus the Board of Education ruled against the segregation in the schools. 1964, President Johnson. 1967, MLK. 1968, as I mentioned, Tommy Smith and John Carlos. This is an iconic photograph. This is 1968. This is a year before I was born, so it's a generation ago. It's not that long ago. And their hands were raised because at that time, the black athletes weren't sure they were going to participate in those Olympic Games in Mexico City because they felt that they weren't being treated the same as the white athletes. And Dr. Edwards was one of the people that convinced the athletes that they should go, that they should share the stage and use that platform to raise awareness for social injustice, to raise awareness for the racism that was still prevalent in our society back then. That's a photograph that again, just really captures the essence of that moment in 1968. And from that moment, we started to see a change. Muhammad Ali famously said, "I am not going to war. I am not going to fight the Viet Cong. They've done nothing to me." And Muhammad Ali lost his title. They stripped his title because he said, "I'm not going to war." And this activism became more and more out there for us to see. And again, that's 15 years after Jackie Robinson, 20 years after Jackie. It's not that long, right? Some of you have children that are 20 years old. Think about that time frame. And John Carlos raising their arms was 20 years. and all that happened before then and what's happened since. And Jackie gave black athletes hope. Every black athlete that played in the major leagues after that would always say, thanks to Jackie. Jackie was my inspiration. And a little shout out to our biggest Met fan on campus, Sister Kathleen. The starting third baseman for the Miracle Mets was a player named Ed Charles. And Ed Charles grew up in Florida. And he recalled a story where Jackie Robinson came to play in Florida when he was on the Montreal Royals farm team for the Dodgers in 1946. And he remembers seeing Jackie play, and then the team was leaving on the train. And the kids ran after the train as it was leaving the station. And he said he put his ear to the track as the train was pulling away, because he said he still wanted to be as connected to Jackie as he possibly could, even though he was already miles away. And he recounted that story many, many times, and it's part of the 42 movie. And poetic license aside, it's the power of that moment that gave a young boy in 1946 the belief that he could be a major leaguer. And then 20 some odd years later, he again, this iconic picture of Ed Charles jumping in the air when the Mets won the World Series. For true Met fans, it's a picture that you'd never forget. And he said, Ed Charles said, I sat in the segregated section of the ballpark and watched Jackie. And I finally believed what I read in the papers, that one of us had made it. I mean, think about that statement. One of us had made it. One black athlete. In the history of sport, one black athlete. That is so powerful, right? And he said, when the train pulled out, we ran down the tracks listening for the sounds as far as we could. When we couldn't hear it anymore, we put our ears to the track so we could feel the vibrations of the train. We wanted to be a part of it for as long as we could. What a statement. What an impact that one man had. And we see that continuing. I mentioned Muhammad Ali. In 1967, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, at the time, his name was Lou Alcindor, he was invited to the Cleveland Summit by James Brown, arguably the greatest running back in the history of the NFL, who had retired and become an actor. And he gathered black athletes and activists together in Cleveland to decide what to do about what Muhammad Ali wanted to do about the draft. And right there, we saw the power of sport. Kareem was 20 years old at the time. He was the youngest person there. But from that moment, Kareem began a career of excellence, the top scorer in the history of the NBA. No, it's not LeBron, it's not Kobe, it's Kareem. And despite the fact that he played for 22 years, he found time to be a voice of his generation. 1970s and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar go hand in hand. And so you start to understand what Jackie did was more than just playing baseball. And so now in the 2000s, we have LeBron James. This natural extension from Jackie to Muhammad Ali, to Kareem, to LeBron, an outspoken proponent of social justice. You may not like LeBron James as an athlete, and maybe you don't like the fact that he's played on way too many teams for a guy of his talent, right? But as a proponent of social justice, there's nobody better. He speaks up about Black Lives Matter. He speaks up about Breonna Taylor. He has used his position as the best basketball player of this generation to impact racial issues that we have to deal with in our society. And quite frankly, he puts his money where his mouth is. He started the I Promise School in his hometown of Akron, Ohio in 2018. It's a school that supports communities and people of color that weren't getting the same opportunities as everybody else. And again, like him or hate him, the debates about whether he's the best of all time, who cares? What I know is what he does for people is the best of all time, because he's taken his money and he's done something with it, right? We talk about Colin Kaepernick, again, the Super Bowl. right? He last played in the NFL in 2016, and you know what? He's still a topic of conversation every single day. He's still at the tip of everybody's tongue, and he's in the back of everybody's head because of what he stood for 5 years ago, or didn't stand for 5 years ago. Colleen, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I just have I guess, comment / question maybe
Sure.
about that. I was actually thinking about that last night as we were watching the Super Bowl. There was a commercial that was, it just kind of said, the NFL stands for racial equity and equality, and kind of their message out there. And I was just like, wow, that's so interesting, and like how far they've come, because Colin Kaepernick was like blacklisted from the NFL when he did that.
Yes.
I mean, and and it was I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like people felt it was such a contradiction to like what, sports stood for, the national anthem in sports. And, so I don't know if you could speak to that, like how you feel like just in the past 4-5 years, because you
Sure.
said 2016, how that, his initial move there, how that's kind of developed or changed things in terms of, black athletes in, say, the NFL.
Sure, Colleen, I'll address that. And it's funny because the first time I taught a sport and sociology course at Brooklyn College was in 2016, right in the middle of this. And the debate we had in the classroom was really fascinating and illuminating, because there was so many different people in the room. The diversity in the room was tremendous. And so seeing it from different perspectives really, again, opened my eyes to the power of sport beyond the scoreboard. The NFL has done stuff. They've done better, right? They've donated $44 million since they agreed to address social justice issues. And just last week, they committed to raise that number to $250 million over the next 10 years to combat in social injustice and to initiate social justice programs. So what Colin Kaepernick did again, and I saved him for last purposely, again, Abdul's timing with the Super Bowl being the main reason, he did something that reminds me of Kareem and Muhammad Ali and Jackie Robinson, because by taking an unpopular stance to certain people, he raised the level of discussion. He raised the level of awareness. Look, are we a perfect society? No, we are not. That's not up for debate. Can we be better? Of course we can be better. Part of the way you get better is to be educated. Interestingly, coming from a professor at a tremendous school like ours, but that's why we're here. We're here to educate. We're here to teach our students to be better. And that's what Colin Kaepernick did. Again, I don't take sides. I look at the results. The results are good. I don't like the fact that he didn't get another chance to play football. I'm not a general manager, but I run a football game. I think he has enough talent that he should have been playing, but that's not my point. What I'm concerned about, and what I think is the focus that's so powerful, is that there's now a discussion, a good discussion, to make changes, important changes that are going to make our society better, changes that are going to make people of color safer. How is that a bad thing, right? I don't think he was disrespecting the flag as much as he was saying, look, we got to talk about this. If my action is going to get the conversation up, then that's what I have to do. And he did. And again, to me, that's a good thing, Colleen. Stacy?
So I don't want to slow down the presentation because I know that this is the presentation part, not the discussion part. But since we're we're talking about Colin Kaepernick, because he was somebody I thought of also. You talked about all these different people who took a stand or were the firsts and whatnot throughout, and the impact that they have. But when I see or read about them, I see that they also have excessive punishment laid upon them, well beyond the kind of punishment that any white athlete would have if a white athlete were advancing the same position. So Colin Kaepernick, he's blackballed. Muhammad Ali, got his title stripped. Jackie Robinson, just the abuse for being the first. You could go on and on and on. So yeah, how do we, yeah.
So Stacy, you're right, but that's part of the discussion,
Right?
that there is a disparity in punishment. There is a disparity in reaction. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not a perfect society. We're just not. We're not there yet. I like to say there was one perfect man that walked this earth. The rest of us are trying to figure it out, right? And that's the reality of it. And so, as I mentioned, we're better than we were yesterday, but we're not nearly as good as we can be tomorrow. And I think if we keep that philosophy in our minds, then eventually we're going to get better. Again, what happened a few weeks ago, again, putting politics aside, to have a black woman stand up and take the oath of office for Vice President of the United States was a powerful moment for this country. Maybe 200 years too late, but it's here. And we don't have to say first vice president anymore. Yesterday, we had the first female referee. I can't wait for the day where we don't say the word first anymore, that it's just normal conversation. It's just normal happenings, right? So, yeah, Stacy, the punishment is not equal, which is why that's why James Brown called that summit in 1967. That's why Tommy and John Carlos stood up and raised their fist, because it wasn't fair. And it's still not fair. It's not entirely fair yet. Again, we're not perfect. We're getting there, but we're not perfect yet. And so I agree with you. And so as we continue along with the conversation, we've talked about the athletes, but I know the topic is race and racism. So what I want to do is come back to my slides for a moment as I hit the wrong button. My apologies. Let me catch up here. And look at race versus ethnicity. And understand the definition. Is more accurate to use race when referring to attributes that are passed along genetically from generation to generation, and to use ethnicity to describe the culture, heritage of a group of people. And the textbook definition of racism, which refers to the belief that race determines human traits and characteristics, and that racial differences result in the superiority of a particular race. I mean, think about how ridiculous that is. Think about how, as a society, that word should even exist in 2021. But it's still here. It's still something we're dealing with. Even in sport, in a place where black athletes dominate the record books, they dominate the sports scene, but we still have to accept the fact that it's here, right? But I will say, we're starting to see some changes. We're starting to see some advances in society and in sport. And in particular, the Rooney Rule, which was passed by the NFL in 2002, which provides that every opening for a position in the NFL, head coach or administrative position, a black candidate has to be interviewed. It's progress. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction, because before the Rooney Rule, they didn't have to. Teams didn't have to interview a minority candidate. And we have a lot of minority candidates in the league right now. A lot of minority coaches. The Jets hired a coach with a Muslim background, right? And the defensive coordinator in the game yesterday who shut down the powerful Kansas City Chief offense, Todd Bowles, is African American. Didn't do so well as the head coach of the Jets, but boy, did he call a game yesterday. And it's a good chance he's going to get another opportunity to lead a team. The HBCU schools that I mentioned earlier were recognized by the NFL just a few years ago before the Super Bowl, where all the Hall of Famers that went to HBCU schools were presented before the game. And a lot of players that we knew but didn't know they went to an HBCU school. We think everybody in the NFL goes to Alabama, Notre Dame, or Clemson, right? And that's not the case. So the NFL took the time to recognize that. And again, Abdul, your timing couldn't be better. Over the weekend, Bill Nunn was elected to the NFL Football Hall of Fame. Now, many of you don't know who Bill Nunn is. You might know his son, Bill Nunn Jr., who starred in a few of the Spike Lee movies. But Bill Nunn was a scout for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 60s and 70s. Well, the Steel Curtain defense that won 4 Super Bowls for the Steelers in the 70s was built off of Bill Nunn scouting HBCU schools and finding these talented athletes that everybody else was ignoring. And some of these names are very familiar to us. L.C. Greenwood, Mel Blount, John Stallworth, Donnie Shell. I mean, these are iconic names that made their mark in the league, in the Super Bowl, and some of them are in the Hall of Fame now. But it was one scout that said, I'm going to go scout these players at the HBCU schools. Powerful story. And to have him finally recognized in the Hall of Fame, again, Stacy, it tells us that we're making progress. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. You know, and maybe he should have been there sooner, but I'm glad he's there now. Posthumously, but he's there. Right, a couple of weeks ago, big announcement by Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball. Again, I see our biggest baseball fan has joined us. Good afternoon, Sister Kathleen. But Rob Manfred made a big statement a couple of weeks ago. He said, you missed my story about Ed Charles. I'll have to tell it to you later.
Okay.
But he said that all of the statistics from the Negro Leagues are now going to be incorporated into Major League Baseball's records. Well, what the heck did we wait so long to do that for? And maybe it's because of Colin Kaepernick, and maybe it's because of all the social unrest that happened this summer. Again, I'm not so sure I care about the why. I care about what? I care about the result. Should this have been done 50 years ago? Of course it should have been. But that doesn't take away the significance of it happening now. And now all of those athletes that toiled in the Negro Leagues, that had to stay in bad hotels and play on bad fields and didn't make any money, well, at least they're getting recognized for their talents. I'm a proud owner of a Josh Gibson jersey. Many people don't even remember who Josh Gibson was. Arguably the greatest hitter of the Negro Leagues. I also have a Jackie Robinson jersey, and I have a plaque of Jackie Robinson in my office because, like I said before, I kind of walk the walk and talk the talk here. And then, you know, we've had Black Lives Matter all summer. And again, powerful statements, powerful movements to tell us we can do better, that we have to do better. And we saw the sports leagues and teams across the country react to the shooting of Breonna Taylor, to the shooting of Jacob Blake. The Mets and Marlins came together on August 27th, protest police brutality. They stood on the side of the foul lines, and then they walked off the field, and the game was canceled. That's a powerful message to send to corporate America. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. NBA players wearing names on the back of their jerseys in the bubble last year. Not their names. The names of people that need to be known. LeBron James, everybody knows him. But not everybody knows some of the people on the backs of those jerseys. Powerful statements. When Jacob Blake was shot in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Bucks said, we're not playing tonight. Go hit the road. We have something more important to worry about than a basketball game. And so we talk about racism. We've talked about the African-American athlete, but we can't forget about the Latinos and the Hispanics who have also suffered from racism. We cannot forget about the Asian American athletes who have also suffered from racism. I remember a story. Again, I was teaching at Fairleigh Dickinson at the time, and Jeremy Lin had taken the league by storm. That's a long time ago. He's still in the league, but what he had done those first couple of weeks was unbelievable. He actually outscored Kobe at the Garden one night. I mean, he just lit up the league, and nobody could understand where this guy came from. And so there was an article, because after his 2 or 3 weeks of really dominating the league, he had a bad game. And so the headline was "Chink in the Armor." Well, that writer was fired, obviously. But can you imagine that was the terminology, that was the phraseology that he had to use to describe the most popular at that time Asian American athlete, and use the word chink in his headline? But that's not that long ago. That's one career ago, right? It's not that long ago. That's what we're seeing. There's a better awareness now of Native American athletes who have taken their fair share of abuse. Before the game yesterday, there were a lot of protests about the Chiefs' name. We've seen some changes. We've seen the Cleveland Indians get rid of their Chief Wahoo mascot, and now they're moving to changing the name Indians in the next couple of years. And we saw most famously, not too long ago, we saw a big impact in the NFL when it came to Indian names. Out with the old and in with the new. They don't have a name, but you know what? Their no name is better than the name that they had, because it's not a racist name anymore. And whatever name they come up with, at least we can accept the fact that they're going to be more aware of the name that they choose. The moniker that they choose is going to have an impact. And so, as I started this lecture, we focus on sport as a positive force in equality. We have to. We have to use sports as a platform to make all parts of society equal. We have to create positive role models. We have to use sport as a way out of poverty. We have to integrate communities together through sport. We need school-based sport programs that allow families that parents who work 2 full-time jobs be able to afford for their child to play sports. It breaks my heart to know that a child from an economically challenged family cannot play a sport because of money. In a society where we have enough money to fund the most nonsensical programs, that we can't figure out a way to get kids playing sports, it's really heartbreaking for me. My parents weren't rich. We were low middle class. The first pair of soccer cleats I ever owned were from Argentina because our coach was Argentinian. We got them really cheap. My parents still figured out a way, but it was hard because they knew how important sport was. Not for the winning and the losing. And believe me, I did more share of my losing than I did of winning, which actually taught me to be a better person. But those qualities that you get in sport, you don't get anywhere else. You learn teamwork. You learn discipline. You learn sacrifice. You learn time management. Oh, wait a minute. Those are all the things that Stacy teaches in her leadership class, right? But if you have a child that doesn't get that exposure because of money, then we as a society are doing something wrong. And we as a society aren't doing enough to combat those problems of inequality. No kid should be denied the opportunity to play baseball because they don't have cleats or a glove, or play soccer because they don't have a uniform, or they don't have cleats. It's silly. And so as we wrap up the lecture here, I want to close with a quote again from somebody that I think again has this power to effectuate change through sport. And again, it's something that I want to share visually, because I think you need to see it to appreciate it. And again, it's a book and a movie. Unfortunately, again, in this generation, they'll watch the movie before they read the book. But Nelson Mandela and the movie, the book Invictus. Again, Nelson Mandela suffered his share of indignities to stand up for what was right. But I think he captured the essence of sport and racism and change when he said sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down racial barriers. What a perfect way to sum up this story about racism in sport. To understand that we who love sport so much, who teach sport, that we have the power to make change, that we have the power to inspire. I've taught at a lot of schools, as you heard through my speech here tonight, and I'm so happy that I was given the opportunity to teach at Caldwell full time. Because the thing about Caldwell that I love the most is the diversity that we have on this campus. And the diversity that I have in my classroom, you can't ask for a better place to teach about the power that we have in our hands as professors, as educators, as administrators, as coaches to make change. The students that we have seen come onto this campus in the last 5 years because we added football, because we've added lacrosse, because we've added programs that fit their youth, where they grew up, where they went to high school, how they went to high school, to give students a first-time opportunity to come to this school because of football. That's a story that we need to continue to tell. We need to let people know that football, who cares, wins or losses? I mean, the coaches care. Fans care a little bit. But if we look beyond that and we look at what we've done for students from economically challenged communities, from economically challenged families, that's what sport does. And when we talk about anti-racism, that's how you beat it. That's how you stop racism. You make everybody equal. It's not that hard to do. And so, as I've said all along, we're better than we were yesterday, but we can be a lot better tomorrow. And if we keep that mentality, and I know we do that at Caldwell, I know because I walked through that Hall of Flags, I know because I've seen the honors that we've given to the pioneers across this campus. And I know because Abdul and Colleen and Sophie created this lecture series for this purpose, I know that we can continue to make a difference. And I'm a little biased. I'm going to make my difference through sport. That's all I
Great.
have.
Excellent. Thank you. That was really great. So a few things just to note. So for those who are just joining us for the first time, the way this is divided up is that we have week 1 is typically a lecture, and then week 2 will be the discussion. So we can kind of ask if there's any initial or like pressing questions that you have for Professor Malvone. If not, they can wait until the next time. It's actually going to be 2 weeks just because next Monday is President's Day break. So our next lecture series, which will be the discussion portion of this, will be on Monday, February 22nd. Same Google link and everything like that. So I'll just open it up if there's any initial questions before we wrap up.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon.
Yes.
Who's that?
Noah.
Noah?
Yeah, hi, I'm sorry. I just had a question. I wasn't sure if I was able to make it, not for next week, but the week after. I just had a question for you. So I know a lot of, I'll make it quick because I know we have to go, but I know a lot of people say, and I disagree with it, but everyone says like, oh, people are just too sensitive, like in regards to like changing names for football teams, or like you said, with like the headlines for specific articles. When people say that to me, I completely disagree, but I'm in a genuine awe. I don't know what answer to give. I think that that shouldn't even happen in the first place, you know?
It's a great question. And again, I mentioned it earlier. It's about education. It's about raising awareness, because if something is of a sensitive nature to somebody, we have to at least acknowledge it. And then we have to see if there's a way to address it. You can't pretend that somebody isn't offended by something, right? We're all offended by
absolutely.
things. So if somebody's offended by something you said, something you did, wouldn't you walk up to them and apologize to them? Of course you would. So why wouldn't we do the same thing when an entire population of Native Americans are bothered by a name? Why wouldn't we change it, right? So we have to appreciate the fact that there is offensive things still, and we as a society need to be educated, understand why it's offensive, and then figure out a solution that satisfies everybody, because I think that's how we get better. So all I can tell you, Noah, and I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, but I would say to somebody who looks at you that way, you should try to be a little more educated about it, and educate them, or direct them to a place where they can be educated. But that's somebody that again, unfortunately, we're not a perfect society, and we're not a perfect race. We're not perfect people, right? As I mentioned earlier, it was only one perfect man that walked on this earth, and the rest of us are struggling to meet him again.
Got it. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer that. And yes, you were pronouncing it correctly.
Very good. I hope to see you on campus.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
I think Sister Joanne is trying to ask a question, but she's on mute.
You're still muted, Sister Joanne.
I feel bad. Can she type it?
Can you type it in the chat? Stacy, did you have a question or anything?
Oh, I just wanted to say to Noah, I run into that all the time when people are saying, "Oh, you're too sensitive." The whole name change for the football, it's exhausting. So and I don't have an answer, but it's just very frustrating, and I guess we just have to continue with the education.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
Yeah, it really is.
And I think too, I think it's easy to say that, someone else or another group is just being sensitive when you're the one in the quote majority, on the other side. I think it's really easy. And I think so much of those questions or, things that come up, it's all about like, are we able to see the perspective of someone else if we ourselves are constantly living in like the majority side of things.
Sure, Colleen, we have that saying, put yourself in someone else's shoes, you know, and it's true. You know, we see things from our perspective, and we grew up in a world where maybe we weren't aware of the sensitivities because we didn't experience them.
Yeah.
But again, I can tell you, my father was an Italian immigrant who came here with a very heavy accent, no high school education. It wasn't easy growing up. We were sensitive to words. We were sensitive to comments. Certainly not to the level of racism, but if you're not exposed to it, it's hard to appreciate. It's certainly hard to understand other people's sensitivities. And I think, again, it just comes down to education more than anything else.
Yeah.
And again, it's change. Kamala is changing the narrative now. Again, politics aside, doesn't matter what her politics are. What matters is that she is now given hope, the same way Jackie gave hope to Ed Charles in 1946. Kamala is now giving an American woman who wants to now hold the highest office in the land. Well, if that's not powerful, then what is? Right?
Yep.
Can I say something now?
Oh,
Can
yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear
I
you.
have a question. I'm so sorry I missed most of the talk, but it was excellent. Just the fact that you're bringing this up. I am so proud of the school and the faculty and the coaches. I affirm those coaches right and left because they are really the grassroots people. They're out there winning or losing or worrying about who's making their grades and who aren't, but they really are witnesses to how it should be in this world and how to play fair. So we've got to continue to
Sister
work.
Joanne, thank you for the kind words, and I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, as I said, what we've done with the football program goes beyond wins and losses. It goes to the changes that we've been able to make, and that's where, you know, again, as a university, I couldn't be more proud to be a member of this university and to walk around with my Caldwell clothes on and let people know that we're making a change. This small Catholic private school in North Jersey is making changes. And to me, you know, that's more powerful than an Ivy League education because we're doing things the right way.
We are. God bless you all.
Thank you, sister.
Great. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks for our discussion on this. We might have to have a bit of a refresher when we open up the discussion, but I think it'll be good. So I hope to see you guys in 2 weeks, and thank you for coming.
Bye. Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Neil.